It makes no sense at all. I mean, you're right. It's a rule that's nearly 30 years old. Back in the late 80s, when MPs were being kind of strong-armed to support for the first time the televising of Parliament,
Yes.
they needed some reassurance that they weren't going to be mercilessly mocked. In 2016, of course they're going to be mercilessly mocked. That's life, and I just think they need to get over themselves and allow it to happen.
Right. I mean, do we want, though, MPs to be overtly ridiculed and exposed to ridicule, as you were saying, mocked in that way, if they're perfectly able to do it themselves?
Well, indeed, they are able to do it themselves, but the idea that you would offer some kind of special protection to Parliament of all the institutions in the country, even the royal family, doesn't get that kind of protection. So why on earth would our elected representatives, they're big enough and ugly enough to look after themselves, to answer for themselves. They don't need this kind of protection. If they do need this kind of protection, I would just wonder if they're up to the job in the first place.
Right. I mean, one might say, you would say that now, you're not an MP anymore. I never heard this clamour for this when you were an MP, Tom Harris.
That's absolutely right, and I just think, the wonderful perspective one is given when you're no longer a member of the chamber.
Yes, exactly, from the comfort of your studio up there. I mean, is this MP's just clinging on to deference?
In the spirit of John Wilkes, who was banned from reporting what MPs said, I think broadcasters should just ignore this. There are all sorts of ridiculous rules that the House of Commons puts in place. Broadcasters should just ignore it. I was told I wasn't allowed to use Periscope to broadcast, and I just ignored it. Broadcasters should just ignore it.
You rebel, you. What about you?
Although it pains me to agree with Douglas, I actually do agree with him. Tom and I worked very well together on the shadow transport team for many years, but the internet means that these clips can be picked up, used, abused in whatever way. And the idea that you say to Jon Stewart on The Daily Show that you can't show something funny, it's Alice through the looking glass type of politics, I'm afraid.
Do you think Chris Grayling would make a good subject for satire, Tom Harris?
Well, I probably unfairly described him last week as someone who looks like he's just been ejected from an Undertaker's convention for bringing everyone else down.
Oh, charming.
I'm sure that Chris actually is a very light-hearted chap, but he needs to drag the House into the 21st century.
He's in an unfortunate position. He's having to justify the old buffer culture. Change the old buffer culture, don't blame Chris.
Right. Do you think it'll change, though?
It's got to change. I mean, in fairness to Speaker Bercow, when I first became an MP, I was not allowed to put online clips of me speaking in the chamber. I had to go through some great big bureaucratic process. Bercow's changed it. We need to go further.